Last night, Iran launched a new large-scale missile attack on several Israeli cities. Some of those missiles managed to strike areas in the Tel Aviv metropolitan region and in Haifa. At least 8 people have been killed, and dozens more are injured after these attacks targeted residential areas. In Haifa, some Iranian missiles hit a power plant near the port, damaging the city's electrical infrastructure. Now, Israel is promising massive retaliation. Officials have warned the people of Tehran, "We told the Ayatollahs, if they attack our civilians, there will be consequences, and those consequences will be felt in Tehran." So, in the coming hours and days, it's expected that Israel will step up its attacks on targets in the Iranian capital. This has already triggered an exodus. Huge convoys of cars have been seen fleeing Tehran as fear spreads across the city.
In any case, what really matters now is remembering that whenever something happens in the Middle East, the rest of the world feels it. And you don't even need to watch the news to know it. Usually it's enough to just go and fill up your car, because obviously we're talking about rising oil prices. Despite all the green energy transformation, black gold is still the lifeblood of today's economy. And right now, that lifeblood is a lot more expensive than it was before the Israeli attack. Right after Israel launched its airstrikes, Brent crude shot up 12.5%, reaching $78.5 per barrel. And even though it later dropped to $73, that's still way above the $65 it was trading at just a few days ago. To give you an idea, the ratio between call and put options on WTI, America's benchmark crude oil, has hit its highest level since Russia launched its full-scale invasion back in 2022. VisualPolitik community, if this conflict keeps escalating, some are already warning about a possible Armageddon, the next major economic disaster after the war in Ukraine turned the global gas market upside down. If the worst-case predictions come true, Brent crude could soar past $130 per barrel, more than double its price back in May of this year. Right now, no one knows how this conflict will unfold. What we do know is that it won't be good. Are we heading toward an economic Armageddon? And why is Iran so crucial to the global oil market? Stay tuned, because we're going to break it all down in this video. But before we continue, let me ask you something. Have you heard of the 14 Eyes Alliance? It's an international agreement between countries like the US, UK, Canada, Germany, and others, allowing their governments to collect and share internet user data with each other. In simple terms, your online activity can be monitored without your knowledge and potentially used against you. So, is there a way to avoid this kind of surveillance? Yes, by using a VPN, but not just any VPN. You need one that's reliable, secure, and based outside the 14 Eyes Alliance. That's where CyberGhost VPN comes in. CyberGhost is the ultimate tool for protecting your privacy online, not just from governments, but also from hackers and cybercriminals. It's headquartered outside the 14 Eyes countries, and unlike many VPNs, it actually keeps no logs of your activity. So just open CyberGhost VPN before you browse, and no one will be able to track your online activity. You get full privacy. It's fast, it's super easy to use, it's trusted by over 38 million users, and has an excellent rating on Trustpilot. Plus, it blocks ads and malware, while still giving you all the classic VPN perks, like bypassing geo-restrictions on streaming platforms or accessing websites blocked by governments. And here's the best part. By using the link in the description, you are getting a special offer. It's just €2.03 a month, and you can connect up to 7 devices. If you share your account with friends or family, that's basically 30 cents per person for full online privacy. That's not bad for less than the price of a coffee, right? If you want to try CyberGhost and support our channel at the same time, we'd really appreciate it. Just use the QR code on the screen or the link in the description, and don't worry, there is a 45-day money-back guarantee. So if it's not for you, no problem. You've got nothing to lose by giving it a shot. Just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. There's something we really need to understand. Iran's nuclear program and its oil business are not two completely separate things, not at all. Petrochemical sales are one of the regime's biggest sources of income that, unsurprisingly, ends up funding the nuclear program. So if Israel really wants to shut off the Ayatollah's cash flow, the quickest way would be to bomb Karg Island, the nerve center from which 90% of Iran's crude oil is exported. That would be the worst case scenario for oil prices. But not because the world would suddenly be missing Iran's exports. You see, Iran only exports about 1.7 million barrels a day. That barely covers 2% of global demand. To put that into perspective, Saudi Arabia and the rest of OPEC are believed to still have the capacity to ramp up production by another 5 million barrels a day. Of course, having the capacity doesn't mean they'll actually do it, but it gives us a sense that Iran isn't exactly a top-tier producer. So no, oil prices haven't spiked because Israeli strikes took a big chunk of supply off the market. Or at least that's far from the main reason. The real culprit lies elsewhere. And the explanation is actually pretty simple. Since nobody knows what's going to happen, everyone's rushing to stockpile oil as an emergency reserve. But what exactly is the world so afraid of? Well,
Israel-Iran tensions threaten to disrupt traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran blocks this narrow choke point, it could affect up to 20% of global oil flows. A closure would likely send oil prices above $100.
What's really worrying isn't that the Ayatollah regime might stop exporting its own oil, it's that they could prevent other countries from exporting theirs. Iran could block the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point through which 21 million barrels of oil pass every single day, coming from Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and of course, Iran itself. Remember that detail, it'll be important later. This narrow waterway between Iran and Oman handles nothing less than a quarter of the world's oil supply and a third of all liquefied natural gas. So yes, it's easily one of the most strategic geographic points on the planet, but it doesn't stop there. Tehran could also double down on its support for the Houthis, who have already been giving global trade a serious headache with their attacks in the Red Sea. And we're not just saying this for dramatic effect. Some insurance companies have already raised premiums by, get this, 20% for cargo ships sailing through the region. That said, the hottest flashpoint is still the Strait of Hormuz, and for good reason. The Ayatollahs have been threatening to block this crucial trade route for decades, and believe me, they do have the tools to pull it off. Sure, Iran doesn't have a fleet as powerful as the US Navy, but it does have fast, elusive speedboats, naval mines, mini-submarines, sea drones, and coastal missiles. It's a cheap arsenal, but more than enough to keep non-military vessels out of the area. And that's the whole point. Iran doesn't need to sink enemy fleets or anything like that. This would be an entirely asymmetric conflict. While the rest of the world would need to completely push Iran out of the region, Iran would simply aim to scare away oil tankers, causing massive disruption and gaining leverage at the negotiating table. But of course, things are never that straightforward. As we've said before, Iran tends to bark more than it bites. Yes, this wouldn't be the first time they've attacked ships in the region or tried something similar, but a full-scale blockade, that would be unprecedented. So let's take a look at the arguments for and against whether Iran would actually dare to cross that red line. At first glance, there's one obvious reason why Iran hasn't blocked the Strait of Hormuz. Doing so would basically be like declaring war on the entire world. Yes, Iran could block the strait, but the real questions are, for how long and at what cost? Because let's be honest, what good is that bargaining chip if the US comes in and wipes out all your forces in the region? Keep in mind that Uncle Sam has the US Navy's 5th Fleet stationed in Bahrain. What's Bahrain? It's a tiny island state with a population of around 1.5 million, located on the western shore of the Persian Gulf, and it has very close ties with the United States. So close, in fact, that it hosts one of the US's most strategically important naval bases. But don't imagine that the US would be the Ayatollah's only problem. China is one of the world's biggest oil importers, and I doubt it would be thrilled to see oil prices double overnight. And naturally, there are the other Gulf states, like Saudi Arabia, which not only have powerful militaries of their own, but it could also push other major powers to intervene quickly. Nevertheless, the opposite scenario could also happen. Here's one strong reason why Iran might actually go ahead and block the Strait of Hormuz. If you'll pardon the expression, you could say Iran has the West's Gulf allies, like Saudi Arabia or Iraq, by the short and curlies. Some of the region's most important oil fields and refineries are just a stone's throw from Iran. And by a stone's throw, we really mean within missile or drone range. In less than an hour, Tehran's regime could destroy the main source of income for those countries and disrupt global oil supply without even needing to block the strait. Think about it. Why block a trade route when you can shut down production at the source? And believe me, there is precedent for this.
In 2019, Iran was widely believed to be behind a drone attack on Saudi Arabia's largest oil processing facility that temporarily cut the kingdom's crude production by more than half and briefly pushed up global oil prices by as much as 20%.
You heard correctly. A single drone strike by some unidentified mysterious force was enough to make oil prices shoot up by 20%. That's way more than the recent spike following Israel's attacks. So in a way, Iran's biggest enemies, like Saudi Arabia, also end up being its biggest shield. Since they have the most most to lose if the conflict escalates. They might go out of their way to stop the US from getting directly involved. But hang on a second, there's still one more argument in favor of the good old nothing ever happens theory, and against the idea that Iran will actually go ahead and block the Strait of Hormuz. Keep in mind that even though its impact on the global market is relatively small, black gold is still one of Tehran's main sources of revenue. And of course, if Iran blocks the strait, you can bet Iranian oil tankers won't be able to trade either, whether due to naval minefields or because of international pressure from countries outside the strait. In other words, this kind of move wouldn't just hurt the rest of the world, it would hurt Iran too. It would turn into a game of who can hold out the longest.
They have no interest in disrupting their own piggy bank.
And once again, this could seriously upset other countries, like China. According to official data, 14% of the oil consumed by the Asian giant comes from Iran. But if we take into account the massive fleet of smuggling tankers the Ayatollahs use to dodge international sanctions, that figure could actually be over 20%. Don't forget, for years, Iran has been the world's top illegal trafficker of oil and gas. But now, that dubious honor goes to Vladimir Putin's regime. In fact, the war in Ukraine hit Iran hard because the few tanker operators willing to risk getting into the smuggling business chose to work for the Russians instead, since they paid better. And let's not forget that China is, by far, the main destination for this double black gold. So let me ask you the same question. Do you think Xi Jinping would be happy about losing a significant share of one of the few raw materials China can't produce on its own? And make no mistake, what Xi Jinping thinks really matters to the Ayatollahs. Keep in mind that Iran is under so many sanctions that it can scarcely access advanced technology, unless of course the Chinese are willing to sell it to them under the table. So if Iran wants to keep pushing forward with its nuclear program and modernizing its military, it needs to stay on good terms with China. In short, blocking the Strait of Hormuz would be catastrophic, not just for Iran, but for the entire world. Brent crude would easily break the $100 mark, and many analysts say it could shoot up to $130, which could drag a lot of developed economies into recession. But that move would also bring plenty of headaches for Iran itself. After all, they've been threatening to make such a move for decades, and never have. At the end of the day, one word sums up this whole situation: uncertainty. And we're not just talking about uncertainty around Iran or Israel. We also have no clue what Donald Trump's next move will be. On this channel, we already explained how Israel's attack caught the White House completely off guard. Despite his usual bravado, it seems Trump was trying to score a political win through diplomacy until the Israelis struck just in time to shut that option down. So what will the US do now? Well, we don't know. What we do know is that this time the situation is very different from similar moments in history. Why? Because the fracking revolution has turned Uncle Sam into one of the world's top exporters of oil and gas. Now, take another look at this chart. Yes, Israel's attacks caused oil prices to spike, but the truth is, prices were already in the gutter. And the reason behind that has a name, and we just mentioned him a moment ago: Donald Trump. If you look closely, prices took a nosedive back in April this year, right after Trump launched a tariff war against the rest of the world. And oil is the ultimate cyclical asset. When times are good, everyone's thirsty for dino juice. But when things go south, well, remember when oil actually went negative during the peak of the pandemic? There's your answer. Trump's tariffs threatened to drag the world into a new global crisis, so oil demand tanked. News that hit like a bucket of cold water for a country that's now a net exporter of petrochemicals.
U.S. oil output set for first annual drop since pandemic. U.S. oil production would drop from a record high of 13.5 million barrels a day now to about 13.3 million barrels by the end of next year as slumping oil prices rattle the sector.
According to Baker Hughes, a US oil services company, there are 50 fewer oil rigs operating in the US today compared to last year. Simply put, they're not profitable with oil prices this low. And things could get worse. Standard & Poor's, for instance, estimates that US production could drop by 640,000 barrels per day over the next year and a half, something that contrasts sharply with Trump's promise to ramp up production. Now, does that mean the Republican administration wouldn't intervene if we're faced with economic Armageddon just because high oil prices benefit the United States? Of course not. I'll say it again. No one knows what the US will do, but one thing is clear. We're not living in the 1970s anymore. Uncle Sam is no longer helpless in the face of an oil crisis. So if there's one takeaway from this video, let it be this: Iran has a long history of barking but not biting. However, this time, it could be different. If Israel hits Karg Island, there's a high chance Iran will respond by blocking the Strait of Hormuz, potentially doubling oil prices and dragging the entire world into another economic crisis. Now, if that scenario plays out, no one knows if the US would step in with a quick military response, or if we'd be facing a months-long standoff. In any case, now it's your turn. Do you think Iran will escalate the conflict? Or will it be another bluff like last year? Will the Ayatollahs actually cross the red line and block the Strait of Hormuz, or attack Saudi oil facilities? And what do you think Donald Trump would do in that situation? And once again, a big thank you to CyberGhost for sponsoring this video. For just €2.03 a month, you get full protection for your data and unrestricted access to blocked content around the world. Remember, you can try it completely risk-free thanks to their 45-day money-back guarantee. And by signing up, you're also helping support our content. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks. See you next time.